What happens when you combine elements of Anno 1800, Tropico, SimCity 4, and Cities Skylines? Well, you get Highrise City, a resource and logistics-focused city builder that I've had on my radar for quite some time. And on paper, this should be a game that I absolutely love. It should be a game that I become hopelessly addicted to, just like I did with Timberborn. So today we're going to find out if that happened. But first, I'm going to give you a little background about the game. Highrise City was under development for nearly a decade, and for the first 7 years of its development, a solo German developer built the game. And in its final 2 years, a small team was put together to finish things up. It was originally released as an early access title back in March 2022, and had its full release in September of last year. And then, 3 months later, it had its first DLC released, Metros and Plains. When you begin, you're greeted with a map selection screen that shows you the entire world with 7 maps that you can play on. Now, first of all, this is giving me strong Cities XXL vibes, which might not be something that you generally want your city builder to be associated with, but in this case, I think it's actually a good thing. I always like the map selection screen in that game, so it's a welcome sight here. That said, there aren't many maps, 7, and there's no map editor, so this is what you're stuck with, so hopefully you really like them. At least they're based on interesting locations from around the world. Each of the maps has a different difficulty rating, which is denoted by the star rating that you see at the top left. But interestingly, there's no way to see this incredibly basic information for all the maps at the same time, so you're going to have to click through all the maps to figure it out. And I'm pointing this out because it's a user interface or UI problem, and UI problems of this kind are kind of found throughout the game, and it's a bit disappointing. It's like writing an essay and forgetting to do a spell check, or citing your citations, and it can ruin the whole experience for some people. But I digress. It is a small team, and it is kind of one of those things that you might expect to see when a small team develops a game. We'll build on the sandbox map today, which is a good choice for beginners. It's flat and has lots of resources, and I believe this is the real-world location for Amsterdam. And though you might think that the name, New Amsterdam, that we're generating is specific to this location, it's actually the name given to all cities when you start, so we'll randomize that name as well as the name of the mayor. Next, we can select our difficulty level, which is a feature that I always appreciate in games like this. More games should allow this so that we can increase the difficulty of the game as we get better at it. We'll begin on the normal difficulty and proceed into the game. And now that we're here, we meet Ronnie, who's the narrator of the game. And he's fairly helpful and will announce key milestones if you let him. And he'll read things like this letter to you. However, I found myself becoming impatient with him and ended up disabling him fairly quickly. Now, the unfortunate consequence of my impatience was that it led me to skip the tutorial the first time I played the game. And that was a bad choice. This game is not Cities Skylines, and if you try to play it like it's Cities Skylines, you will immediately fail by running out of resources. Now, if you've played Anno, you might be fine because this plays a ton like Anno. But now that I know how to play the game, we are going to skip them. And then finally, we're presented with a story and explanation as to why we are playing. Basically, a group of benevolent politicians, philosophers, farmers, and urban planners have come together to solve all the ills associated with cities by making them 100% self-sufficient and sustainable. Kind of. You can have a harbor, but more on that later on in the video. And now that we're finally able to play the game, we'll build our first road along the coast, where I think that we'll find our first homes in the city. But before we can do that, we're going to need resources and utilities, so we'll build a second road heading towards the forest, where we'll establish our forestry industry and a wind farm. And this second road has caused me to record this video multiple times and set me down the rabbit hole of trying to make this blinking and blurring stop. In the last week, I've spent countless hours trying to figure this out. I've adjusted the graphics settings, the resolution, switched between full screen and full screen windowed. I've enabled and disabled DLSS, which honestly is really cool to see implemented in a game like this, in an indie game with only a few developers, but enabling it led to some crazy ghosting sometimes. I've also adjusted VSync and even tried DirectX 12 mode, which by the way, gives you this warning that the game might have warnings and even potentially crash. But even with all of that experimentation, I found no solution. And honestly, half the time, it seemed like this entire menu was bugged out and not doing what I wanted or expected it to do. So I ended up joining the official Discord server for the game and asked for help with the settings, and was surprised to get a response from the developers within a couple of hours, which is incredibly impressive considering that we're half a world apart. And they went above and beyond, creating a beta branch specifically for me to try to fix the bug. Unfortunately though, it didn't work, and the developer explained that it might be an Unreal Engine bug. And if that's the case, it means that this visual bug will literally never be fixed. So I'm really hoping that that isn't the case because this one really bugs me. Pun totally not intended, but I'm gonna take it. So what I'm trying to say is that for the rest of the video, I'm gonna try to minimize this blinking bug, but it is in the game, and if you buy the game, it is something that you will see. Either way, let's get back to the game, and I'll try to walk you through what it takes to make a small, profitable city. I'm going to begin by building our utilities, and we'll build a wind farm out here. That's the only power plant that you begin with. So I just built a secondary road up here and then one going out to where our wind field will be. And it might seem arbitrary that I'm building this out here, and that's because it is. So when you build a wind farm, wind isn't really a factor, but noise can become a problem. So I just want to get these as far away from people as possible. So I'll place this right here. And then this power mechanic works a lot like the power mechanic in Cities Skylines 2. We have to have an electrical substation to provide power to our residences. So we are going to add one right here, right next to our wind farm. And that'll provide power within that radius. So we could build anything in this area and it'll have power. And then I want to add another one close to this area. And what I think we'll do is back it up so that we have maximal coverage. And then we'll need to connect this with a high voltage pylon. So now we've got power, we need water as well. So that's again in our supply, which is, this is an interesting menu, I'm just gonna say it. So you go into supply and it has everything from utilities. So we've got garbage, water, power, as well as shopping, healthcare, police, and fire. So it's kind of an interesting organization scheme here that I don't necessarily know that I agree with. That said, we'll grab a water tower and I'm gonna place that right here. And similar to Cities Skylines 1, we've got to place water pipes. So we'll put those underneath the road, right where they belong. Now, so far, we haven't used any resources. We've just been spending money. And for things like utilities, that's all that you actually will use is money. But as soon as we start building homes, we're going to start using up planks and insulation material. So we are going to need to think about that supply chain. That said, I will begin by building a couple of homes. And I think we'll create a couple of small blocks right here. Now, one thing that is a frustration in this game, you see that the grid looks a lot like Cities Skylines 1 and 2. And just like Cities Skylines 2 in particular, it's really difficult to maintain your grid. So there's no clipping at all right here, even though it says snap to grid. I don't really know what that means. I'm going to pull this up and my grid is just terribly butchered. This is a frustration of mine. It is what it is though. There's not much I can do. So we'll just make the best of it. And I'll try to create some smaller blocks. And the main reason I'm doing this is much like SimCity 4, you kind of end up with these weird blocks where homes spawn anywhere within this area, even if they're not fronting a road. So if that bugs you, like it bugs me, you're gonna need to do what I'm doing and have smaller blocks. And as I place these, you can see that it's immediately using up the insulation and planks. And just this one little block right here has used up almost half of our available materials. So I want to get right away towards building some of our supply chains. So we'll go under building materials. And for planks, we click into here and it's a lot like Anno. We need a sawmill and we need a small logger. Though this is going back to the UI thing. I don't like the way the UI looks. I will put that, I'll be completely upfront about that. I think that the iconography could be a lot better. But right here, for instance, we've got the small logger after the sawmill. That seems backwards to me, but I guess that's a minor quibble. When you click on this though, you can start to see where this will be the most effective. And in the forest, we get to 100%. It can rotate this around. And the interesting thing about this game is that it doesn't seem to matter the direction of the buildings. They'll work no matter what. So it's not like Cities Skylines 2 where it gets really finicky about the placement of roads with specific buildings. So I guess we don't have to worry about that at all. And there we go. We've got our small logger out there. So now we also need our sawmill. So I'm going to start a little factory district. And what we'll do is just kind of send it out this way, send a road out that way. And I think we'll have our factories right about here. I'm going to create a small block. And there's a very specific reason I'm doing that I'll explain in just a moment. But we'll place this right about here. And when you hover over this, it tells you what this building needs. So a couple of interesting things. This building doesn't need power. It costs money and it requires 0.2 garbage processing. So we're going to need garbage processing if we want this to function. So let's place our sawmill within our little factory district right here. And now, like I mentioned, we are going to need garbage processing, which will again be under supply, and then garbage. So we will need two things. We'll need a local garbage collector, which again, more planks. So 4 planks right there. And the radius for this is really large, so we don't have to get it very close to our people. So I'll put that right about here. But we can't stop there. We also need to place a dump. Now, each one of these takes 25 planks. So now you're gonna start to see where we can get into trouble. And if we were just to do what the game wants us to do, we would use up all of our planks. But because I know how to play the game now, I know that if we go over here and shrink this down, we can have a smaller radius. We can even take it all the way down here and place these one by one, if that's what we want to do. And I indeed intend to do that. We'll do 3 for now. And now the other material that we need is insulation. And this is actually a hemp insulation farm. Now to place a farm, you have to have an enclosed area. You won't even see that you can place this until you do that. So what I will do is add in a road. And then I'm going to try to place the farm into here. Hopefully this isn't too large. But the reason why I wanted to place it here is to show you something really neat. It allowed me to place this even though we had this high voltage line there. Had no worries about that at all. And now the other thing that we need to build is we are going to need to build a place to go shopping and a place to get food. So let's pop into industry and you can see that we have food and we only have fisheries and vegetable farms unlocked right now. And I think at a future level, yeah, we'll get fruit farms. So let's begin with a fishery and I'm going to place that right along the coast. And then for our fruit farms, it's exactly the same as our hemp farm. Now this is going to highlight another issue that I have in the game. So I said it looks like Cities Skylines, but look at how much difficulty it's having with snapping. So I had to really play around to get the 90, and then even coming from here getting 180, it's not having it. And I don't really understand what issue it's having here, but it's a thing. So if you play this game, you're going to struggle. And this is just, honestly, it's just really irritating, really annoying, and I don't understand why this is happening. Another irritation, I want to delete a segment of this road, and without the node, it's going to delete the entire road. So lots of little things like that. So I'm going to draw this out to here and then try to redraw this road. And for whatever reason, now it's okay with it. Oh my goodness. But look at that, it left a small gap. There we go. And now I'd like to place this vegetable farm right here, but you're going to see that to place it in this area, we need 15 planks. We currently have 10, which we can see up here. So I'm going to speed this up and see if we can get to 15. Now, interestingly, we're seeing that we have a problem over here at our sawmill. And if we go over this, we can see it's missing resources. So it's still trying to get the resource from here. And there's no hauler. So that's actually why we're having all of our issues. And if we don't build a hauler, we're never going to have more planks. So haulers are found under transport. And this is a really key factor in the game. You have to have a local haulage company to move things around. So this is a middleman between all buildings. So it's one thing that I think is a little bit weird. We aren't able to just grab the resources from our lumber mill out here and bring it over to our sawmill. We have to have the hauler. So it adds an extra trip and a little bit more complexity. And I truthfully, I don't really understand that. All of that said, we're going to place it right about here, and that will cover these buildings, but it's not going to get things downtown. So again, we're going to need one more. So this is probably not the most efficient layout here, but we're going to do it anyway because we are going to have some sort of coverage in this area. And basically these will deploy the vehicles out to go pick up the resources and get them processed. And then we'll start to see these going up. And you can even see immediately our insulation material started being stored and we've maxed out right there. And now after giving it just a minute, we have some planks and we should be able to build our farm. And there we go. Now I want to direct your attention up here and you can see we have an ROI meter, which shows our needs. And you can see there's a huge demand for residential, offices, and industrial. So we're going to need to fulfill that just like we would in Cities Skylines. One thing I did forget to build though, we have our fishery right here, but I never built a grocery store. And if we don't build that, these residences won't be able to actually pick up food. So we're going to need to go back into our supply, go under shopping, and build a supermarket. And the radius of this will basically cover this entire area. So I will bring that out a little bit further, and that will serve all of these homes in this area. So we are bleeding cash right now. And a big reason for that is that we don't have any offices. So we are going to need to get to the next level so that we can get those, because I know that those really drive your economy. So to figure out what we need to get to the next level, we hover over this star right here. And really what we need are more homes. So I'm going to load this entire area up with homes and hopefully reach the next level in short order. And there we go. We've reached the next level. We've unlocked office zoning, fruit farms, clay pits, and brickworks, as well as our medium wind turbine, which is really exciting to see. Now, I can't help but think, where are these people coming from? We have no outside connections. I have no idea. It's kind of an interesting thought because we're fully self-sufficient, but we don't have a harbor. So there are no ships coming in here. It's just people spawning and appearing. One interesting thing is you can see that now we have bricks. And the reason that we have bricks is that our office zones are going to require them. So that is another complexity added to our supply chain. And that kind of happens throughout this entire game. And it's something I really appreciate. All that said, let's add some offices to hopefully balance our budget. And just that little block of offices has used up more than half of our bricks. So let's start that new supply chain as well. So that's under building materials. And then we can go for bricks. We have the clay pit and the brickworks. Now, interestingly, the clay pit and the brickworks both require power and water, which is not something that our lumber supply chain needed. So we're gonna need to think about that. So we'll start with our clay pit, which look at that, it's way out there, which means that we're likely gonna need another transformer. I'm gonna plop this thing down and I'll just put it way out there because it's effective. And then I brought water out there, but we're gonna need power as well. So we're gonna need another transformer. And this is going to be a bit more of a trick, or at least it would appear to be. We're just outside of range. We're gonna need to have power lines going all over. I'm gonna place this as far up here as possible. And then we will need to bring this up here somehow. Now the fun thing, watch this. I can go right over the top of that farm building and easily just connect that right up. And now to finish the supply chain, we just need to add our brickworks. And I think we should be safe with our haulers because it's right here. Should cover this as well. I'm gonna place this right next to it. And the hauler will basically need to drive over, pick them up, drop it off here, and then eventually pick it up from here and drop it off to our downtown area. But let's click on this and see the radius. Would you look at that? We're just outside of the radius. So we can move this and there is no penalty. So we'll just move this slightly. And it looks like right there, we are well within the radius and that should be operational. So we'll have some bricks being produced and we'll have a sustainable supply of that in the near future. Now, one thing you've constantly got to do in this game is just kind of go back and look at your different households and buildings to see how they're doing. And if you click on them, you can kind of figure out how they're feeling. And we can see that House Thornton is not happy because they don't have fruit. That impacts their satisfaction very big. And right here, they don't have healthcare. So we are going to need to place a healthcare building and a fruit farm. So the fruit farms work just like the other farms. So what we'll do is just section off a chunk of land and add a fruit farm. And interestingly, the fruit farm requires bricks. So it's good that we built up that brick supply chain because we're going to need that for our fruit farm. And in fact, this farm needs 10 bricks and 14 planks. And then the other thing that they wanted was healthcare services. And it looks like this just needs 6 planks and some money. We've definitely got that. So we'll place that right in our downtown area. You see the radius of this? Not that great. So we need to place this right here. So now that we've placed this, things should improve once this has employees. But as we can see, that is our problem. Needs 50 workers and we're actually losing population. So my guess is we just need to place some more homes and things will improve. So I'll fill in this block right here. And I just continue to build out this way, which should be really helpful in getting our population up. And look at that. The doctor's surgery is now just fine. We are going to need utilities over here, though. You can already see we've got an indicator, no water. And as we've added that, we've unlocked Hamlet. We've unlocked a lot. We've got public transportation, the ability to take out loans, the ability to purchase extra tiles, a couple of different power plant options, churches, police departments, fire departments, and other road options, 4 and 6 lane roads. Now, in my experience, I've seen no benefit to adding those right now, at least in a small town, so we'll probably avoid those, but we're gonna have to add the police and fire department because they're now requirements along with the church. Oh boy, but we're actually gonna need to add power first. So let's go ahead and add another wind turbine. Now we have our small turbine and our medium turbine. And interestingly, the medium turbine is 3 times more upfront. The maintenance cost is twice as much, and the production is about 2.5 times as much. So I think the big difference here is probably the noise. We're way out here anyway. We could probably get away with just adding a small one, but we'll add a medium one and just kind of check out and see what it looks like. And honestly, very, very cool. I like that. That looks very good. So now let's add our other utilities out here. You can see they're all very concerned about fire coverage. So I think we'll start to plan a little city services complex. And what I'll do is just divide this up right here. Oh my goodness. And it will not accept this road. It says that it's too close. I don't know what the problem is. This is kind of one of those things that I'm seeing a lot in this game. Why won't it do that? It says 96%. I have the angle set to 90. It's very frustrating. So I'll create a smaller road and we'll just do something like that. This will be our city services complex right here. And we'll place fire and police. And this will cover our little community right here, but it's not going to cover any of our industrial stuff, which is a real shame. So this game will suffer from some of the same issues as Cities Skylines 1, where you've got to spam city services if you want adequate coverage. And would you look at this, it looks like we've had a building that's burned down because of lack of fire coverage. So Verde Beach problems. Follow me to this game as well. Now, interestingly, when you get to this point in the game, you are able to hop into the special buildings menu, which is where you have some of your administration buildings. So we can build a city hall. And the main reason you want to build this is you can't actually access your economy until you place this building, which is an interesting choice, but we'll place that right here. And that'll kind of round out our little city services complex right here. And honestly, these assets are fairly attractive looking, and I like the way that they look. And future fill here, and I realized that I never showed you the economy panel. So if you click on the city hall itself, you can open the city budget menu, and there's a lot of granularity here. You can take a look at everything and really dive into why your city is making or losing money, and then adjust your taxes for every different zoning category that you have. Also interesting is that you're able to open up this graph view and actually get a view of your resources and basically all the information about your city that you could ever want over time. And honestly, this is pretty helpful, particularly in a game like this where you might not know exactly what's going on with your supply chain. Here's where you can diagnose it. And now we've reached Small Village and we have the ability to take out loans. We've got some missions and those have started to populate over here already. We can also purchase additional tiles. We've got higher density residential, higher density offices, parks, playgrounds, schools, textiles. We got to do a whole bunch more right now if we want to keep this going. And we have the ability to build our own house. So that's pretty cool. So I do want to build a little bit of high density, or not high density, but medium density to show you what it looks like. And also complain a little bit. So we've got these icons and it's really difficult to see the difference. So right here is low density. They're calling it craftsman zone. The employee zone is our medium density. And the only difference between these icons is that you see in the back right here, we've got a larger polygon. So that's a kind of a weird way to depict this in my mind. Same thing here with our offices. We've got a small office and a medium office. This is, in my opinion, a very weird and strange way of showing the difference in density. That said, we are going to place it anyway. And what I think we'll do is expand out, but look at this. Now I'm again not snapping to anything, even though snap to grid is on, and it's all because I added this diagonal road right here. So the grid breaks more and I just have to accept it. So now let's start placing some of these higher density buildings, and I don't want to place them out on the side. What I think I want to do is redevelop. We've got some money and people now, so we're gonna give this a shot. We'll go underneath our delete menu, and the interesting thing about the demolition filter here is you have the ability to go through and basically select only the things you want to get rid of. So I want to get rid of just the zones. So I'll select that and deselect actually buildings and zones. And I'll get rid of buildings plus zones. Oh, it's the same thing. I'll get rid of roads. All I want is this. And then I can just highlight this. Everything's gone. Obviously they don't like that, but they'll be fine. And now I've filled in a portion of this zone with some of our medium density. You can see that some of these are actually fairly tall. Some of them are kind of more traditional medium density that you might expect to see 5-6 stories tall. So like the assets, I do think that the scaling is a little bit interesting. You can see that some of these that are 4 or 5 stories are almost as tall as something that appears to be 8-9 stories, but the assets are very good. There's a lot of variety, so I'm not going to complain too much about that. One thing that I'm noticing is we're running out of planks fairly quickly, and one of our quests, our side quests, was actually to construct a new sawmill. We'll get 10,000 bucks for doing so. So let's go ahead and do that. That's under planks, and then we need a new sawmill. So I'll place that right over by the other one. And while we're at it, why don't we add another logger as well? And now we've doubled our fun and got $10,000 task complete. And now that we've really beefed up our planks production, let's fill in the rest of this area. Now, the one thing I do want to point out here is that these different densities are different types of workers, and their satisfaction level is different because they have different needs. So when we click on these buildings, for instance, we'll see that they really want textiles and furniture and spices and more fish, which apparently we're running out of, as well as leisure, religion, and education. Now, some of that will be required here as well, but it's not quite as many things. So the craftsmen don't care about furniture, for instance, or clothing for some reason. So the huddled naked masses living in single family homes. So we'll pop a couple of more fisheries right here. And then if we pop into our industry menu, you can see that we've actually got a couple new supply chains. So we've got textiles and furniture. Now for textiles, we get a new farm. We've got a sheep farm that'll produce wool, and we've also got a textiles factory, but that requires wool and paint to produce clothing. And we don't have color. We can only obtain that through trade. So that's an interesting thing because the game talks about being self-sufficient and sustainable, but we can't actually do that just yet. And we can trade. So let's go and try to build a port. And you can see right here, we have ports available to us. We can build a small port. It needs money. It has upkeep. It needs power and garbage. But we should be able to place that right about here, although it will impact all of those residences if it's right here. So let's go a little bit further over. And we now have a small port. So this will allow us to trade items now, which is a really important feature of this game. We can open up our trade menu, and there are things that we still have no ability to produce that we're using, like tools. So I'm going to set ourselves up to buy tools, and we can have this be a recurring order or a one-time order, and even set the number that we'll keep on hand. So I'll say for tools, let's keep 70 on hand, and we'll also do the same thing with paint. Our color, we'll keep 70 of those on hand, and then we can set up that supply chain now that we'll be importing those. So we'll add a sheep farm right here, and then we'll add our textiles factory over in our little factory district. And now that we've added those, we've completed that supply chain. And if you're ever curious, because we don't see all of those up here, we can click in here and it shows all of the different resources that we have, our stockpile. So this is a lot like Anno. If you've ever played that game, this will probably look super familiar to you, all the different resources that you have to manage. That this will just keep growing the longer that you play. Now, I just noticed that we are bleeding money. So I've gone into our port and decided to drop down the number of color and tools that we are importing because this is very expensive to import all of this. Unfortunately, we have way more stored than we actually need right now, but it's cost us most of our money. So what I want to try to do is sell things that we have a surplus of, which will include right now some of our insulation. So we'll sell 30 of those, and we can also sell some of our planks because we have a lot of production capacity there. And you can tell that because these are all the way at the top, we have actually stopped that production chain. So if we don't sell them, we're just not producing anything. Now you can tell that we've basically maxed this out. We have one more thing that we could sell. If we wanted more trade slots, we could expand the size of our port. It's a really neat feature. I like that. And then before we completely run out of money, I'm going to try to build a little bit more commercial, which should balance us out. It's our biggest need. So I'll build more commercial right over here by our city services complex. And it's amazing. Just adding a couple of these in has completely balanced things out along with the changes that we've made over here at our port. And then I want to try to go for some of our higher density offices over here. Now this requires money, bricks, and insulation. And that right there has completely juiced our residential demand. We've got money again. Our population's growing. We're in a good spot. So now you would just keep progressing through the supply chain mechanic, continue building things that are requested, buy additional tiles if you want. You have the ability to buy land right here. It's very expensive and we have no money. You can see it is a very large map. So you could buy quite a number of tiles right here and really continue building a huge city if that's what you wanted to do. But right now, what I want to do is get a good look at the city itself. And one of the things that reminds me of SimCity 4 is that you end up with these strange blocks. I referenced this earlier, but basically you have one home on the street and then this weird center home. If you don't like that, you've got to make really small blocks. Another way that you can experience a city though is by hitting the F button, and it plops this truck down, and now you have the ability to actually drive around your city. Now there is no collision, so if that bugs you, I guess you're not going to be happy with this, but I think that this is a really fun way to experience your city, and I'm glad that it's here. The other thing that this does is you will sometimes get side quests where you have to do deliveries and things of that nature throughout your city, and it's just kind of a fun way to navigate around. It does also expose some of the graphical jank, but I'm going to really forgive it because this is really fun. The other thing that's fun about this is you can drive into the water and explode. And speaking of the water, one of the other interesting things I discovered about this game is if you go underwater, you get this fun underwater view and you can see your city from underwater. And then when you pop out, the camera has water on it, which I like that sort of whimsy in a game. I think it makes it really fun. And you kind of get that from this game. So I've complained about a lot, but this game is a lot of fun. And where they've nailed things, they've really nailed things. So I really do hope that some of the flickering and weird stuff is resolved, because I really, really like a lot of what's going on here. And before I give you my final thoughts about the game, I wanted to show you a couple of features that I think are pretty interesting. First and foremost, we've got the landscaping tools right here, and you can terraform. The terraforming tools are fairly intuitive. You can raise up ground, you can sink things into the ground, you can level things based on wherever you begin the level. So they work pretty well. They're fairly easy to use. You can also go into decoration placement. And I think for a lot of people, this is where the game is going to shine and feel completely different to most other city builders that are out there right now. So you can go through and basically find any asset in the game and place it as a decoration, which is really outstanding. So let's say you want to place this office as a decoration. You can come down and place that right here. No harm, no foul. You can place this as many times as you want. It will not act as a functional building, but you could add it into an existing building or even on top of an existing building, or rather on top of another prop, not on top of another building, but you can create your own props this way in the asset editor that comes with the game as well. So that is pretty interesting. And there are a ton of different types of assets available, everything from trees to rocks to buildings, all the way down to little tiny things like a chicken. You could place a chicken in the game if that's what you want to do. So if you're really into detailing, the options are there in this game. Another thing I like is that there is a fairly strong photo mode, so you can come through here and adjust things such as the time of day. You can adjust the camera tilt, field of view, the depth of blur, things, all sorts of adjustments, and take excellent pictures of your city. And honestly, it looks very nice during different times of day. You can also change the textures of the ground. So if you have great ground textures, you can certainly upgrade those with your own texture or toggle the grass on or off. Lots of different things you can do in here. And then I wanted to show you that it has the eyedropper functionality built into the game, which is something I really, really like. So if you wanted to be able to clone a building quickly or clone a zone, you can do that very easily. And that's just a nice quality of life feature that I think pretty much every city builder should have. I'm not sure why it's not in Cities Skylines 2, but having it built into this game makes it really easy to clone things that you've already placed in your city. And then the final feature I wanted to show you was Steam Workshop support. So there are mods, save games, and buildings available on the Steam Workshop. There's not a ton of them. It's about 180 or so that are on here, but there are different assets and different saves. So if you wanted to test the game out in a more advanced state, you could do that by downloading a save. In fact, I'm going to do that right now, and let's hop back into the game to see what a larger city looks like. So on the workshop, I downloaded a map called the Manhattan Project. It had 3.8 million people, but something is causing the population to drop just a bit. But still, 3.6 million people on this map, and truthfully, it's running really well. There's a couple of things I think that are worth talking about though. This is obviously not a traffic management simulator. You can see that they have a strong transportation network throughout the entire area, and it looks like for the most part, there is a pretty strong roadway hierarchy, but you see that there's not a lot of traffic. And really, that's something I want to drive home with this game, is it's not a Cities Skylines emulator in any way, though there is some visual elements that harken back to Cities Skylines. Ultimately, fundamentally, this is more of an Anno type game, so traffic fixing is not really going to be your thing outside of clicking on a road and upgrading or downgrading it. That's about all that you can do, and you can see the capacity of that particular stretch of road, but it's not going to tank your city. I also want to show you just how complex the supply chain is. When you take a look at the resources here, it gets insane late game. So there is a lot to take in and a lot of content here. So even though there's some rough edges here, I just wanted to point out that there is a lot of content here, and it does seem to work well in late stage in the game as well. I mean, 3.6 million inhabitants, and we are able to run through this fairly smoothly. I mean, you can feel that there's a little bit of lag and a little bit of jitter, but this is also huge, absolutely massive. So huge shout out to Beer Pizza Chips on the Highrise City Discord for recommending that I take a look at this map. And, again, if this is a game that you want to give a shot to, it's nice that the Steam Workshop is there with saves this large that you can check out to see how the game's going to run in your system. And that was Highrise City. And I'll be blunt, I'm not sure that this game should have left early access in September. The flickering bug was really hard for me to overlook, and at times it really overshadowed my gameplay. But that wasn't the only bug that I experienced. I crashed to the desktop on more than one occasion, making me thankful for the plentiful autosaves that the game has enabled by default. And I know that I'm not the only one experiencing these issues based on these reviews on Steam. The thing is, when a game emerges from early access, I think we all expect a certain level of polish, a level that really isn't here with this title just yet. And I think my outlook on the game would have been completely different had the game remained in early access a little bit longer. That said, we're looking at a game that began with just one developer that has grown to a team of just a few people. This game is as indie as it gets, and there's a certain charm to that. And when you look at it from that perspective, it's truly impressive what they've been able to pull off with a shoestring budget and a limited staff. And considering some of my criticisms, I'm very happy with the pricing of the game. Normally, it's only $30 or 30 euros, but at the time of recording, it's on sale for 25% off or $22.49. Impressive for a game that's basically brand new. And I kind of feel like the price is a nod to some of the shortcomings of the game, because this easily could have sold for more if some of the kinks were ironed out. Now, interestingly and oddly, the DLC is only $2.99, and it's also on sale for 25% off. Part of me wonders why this wasn't just added to the base game and the base game price increased. I'll admit it, my reaction to seeing a DLC released so quickly after the base game was released is fairly negative, especially when issues that are as prominent as the ones I mentioned earlier are in the game. Again, this is an unforced error on behalf of the developer and publisher in my opinion. That said, this game is fun. I love the resource chain mechanic, I love the challenge of the economy, and the fact that the story keeps you engaged by giving you goals throughout your entire playthrough. And in a game that doesn't appear to be about detailing, I love that there are a multitude of detailing options available. And I also love that you can drive around your city for the fun of it or for some basic missions. This is a very fun game if you're going into it looking for a game like Anno and not a game like Cities Skylines. But bluntly, this game, while being very different than Cities Skylines 2, feels much the same in terms of its date at release. It has a ton of promise, but it was probably released a little bit too soon. The difference here is that I just can't seem to figure out why the game emerged from early access, unless it was simply to beat Cities Skylines 2 launch date. And that might be the case. This game launched 1 month sooner. But I am hopeful that things will be fixed. The Discord user that I mentioned earlier, Beer Pizza Chips, reported that the blurring issue wasn't present for them until the December update. So I'm hoping that that is the case, because that means that it may be fixable, but I'm not really sure. They also reported decent performance on modest hardware running Linux, something that I believe bodes well for performance generally in the game. I also really appreciate that the developer is being incredibly transparent. Like I mentioned, they are engaging with the community on Discord, fixing bugs that are reported, and taking advice as it comes in. Further, they have a Trello where they have their entire roadmap laid out and they explain what's coming next, so that's really great to see. And they've already had a number of updates since release and have shown a commitment to improving the game so far. So if you decide to pick this one up, go into it eyes wide open. The game is fun, but it's not without bugs. Expect some head scratching and some frustration, such as what I experienced with the roads and the flickering and the occasional freezing and crashing. But also expect the game to be addicting in a similar way to Anno and Timberborn. But again, this is not Cities Skylines, and it's not trying to be. So even though it looks like it in certain ways, it is not a traffic management simulator, so don't pick it up if that's what you're looking for. I'd also highly recommend that you download the demo first to see how you feel about the game, and I appreciate that there is a demo available. And if you decide to pick it up, I'd highly recommend picking it up on sale, at least until the game has a bit more polish. And with that, thank you so much for joining me on this look at Highrise City. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so, and let me know if you like videos like this one. I can continue to produce them if you enjoy them. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.